Hey everyone, this is Emmy Thomas. I'm here with Casey Ace again. So, Casey Ace, even though this is your second time, I'm going to ask you again the question I always ask, which is, what is it like to be you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And that's a valid question because it's been a little while since we chatted last time. Um, I think right now, I am in a place where, like spring and winter, and even the last year and a half were just kind of a dark time. And so I'm coming out of that. And so right now I feel a lot of renewal and like hope for like what what the future has. And even just I'm doing a lot of um digging into like who I am and kind of trying to figure out more about what my purpose is here on this planet. So it's been really fun to think about, but also sometimes really hard to think about, just because anything is possible. So you go from like, there are so many things I could do to like, well, what's the thing that I want to do like today, um, to move myself forward in a direction. So, yes, I feel like I'm still learning and growing and definitely in a more positive place than I've been in a while, which is really great.
Oh, that is great. I love this. I feel like, um, can I describe it as existential angst? Does that sound
Yeah,
accurate?
it's totally existential angst. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So existential angst, I definitely am not immune. I even think that personality disorder people probably maybe or tend to kind of suffer from it more than
Hmm.
non-personality disordered people. I think everybody probably does. You can look at like the poets, the philosophers or whatever. But I at least when I was kind of traveling more like pre-pandemic, traveling more and kind of meeting people, uh I told one of them, that my working title for the next book was, kind of like a psychopath search for meaning or sociopath search for meaning. And she was like, that I want to read this book because and she's also, like on the psychopath adjacent or psychopath spectrum. But yeah, she feels that lack of meaning too. And I think that that
Hmm.
is uh, a really hard question to answer. And so I love talking about it. I feel like that's been kind of my personal journey the last 10 years is being like, what's it all for? Like I might as well be doing something that's worth doing, but what is worth doing? What is going to,
Hmm.
get me excited to wake up each morning. So
Yeah.
did you
Yeah,
come
that's
up
a
with
big
any
thing.
answers yet?
Well, I don't know. Nothing concrete yet. And the issue is I go 150%, like when I'm getting started on a project, I go 150%. I put everything I have into it. And then I get to this point where it just everything just like stops, where I don't have the motivation to keep going, or I start questioning like, am I really this person? Can I really handle this? What if this did become, the thing that I did and it went huge? Like, what would that be like? Can I handle it? And then I sort of have to take a break and step away for a while. So I'm trying to figure out how to like start things without putting 150% into it. So that I can kind of sustain my momentum over time, or even just like how to handle it when I realize something um isn't working for me anymore. Like how to be like okay with letting it go, even though I've sustained it for a number of years or for a certain time, or at one time I was really passionate about it. So I think um, I think that's kind of why I am still searching, because I I don't know if it's like ooh shiny, like if I just get distracted by things. I don't think so, but I think I just get really, 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 really invested in something, and then I hit a speed bump, or I just lose momentum, or something else happens in my life, and I need to evaluate everything. Or sometimes I'll get like a piece of advice that just like hits me in a not great way, and I need to like evaluate like, okay, if this advice is hitting me in a not great way, can I handle more of this? Because there's going to be more of it if I keep going down this path. And I mean, it depends on what it is, but I generally take criticism really personally, and I've tried to work really hard on not doing that. But when I've put 150% into something, and then I receive, even if it's constructive criticism, I'm kind of like, oh, like I put everything I had into that and it still wasn't good enough. So yeah, so I'm just working on like, who am I in that, and like, how do I work through that? And how do I make sure that I'm happy with what I'm doing and I'm not just doing stuff because I feel like I should, or because somebody told me to do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think this is kind of again something that because remind me or remind others, I guess too. You don't identify as being personality disordered or psychopathic, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So I think that this is something though that like personality disordered people maybe, and definitely me and some of the other kind of psychopathic people that I've met would also kind of identify with on the one hand. And I had a friend who said this that it was she said she was surprised. You know, she's been a longtime friend. She said she was a little bit surprised about the book and like kind of me identifying as being a sociopath and kind of identifying specifically with like this idea of personality disorder and having kind of difficulty with my sense of self and my personality, I guess. And she said that it seemed like I had such a strong personality, you know, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
was like always going to do kind of what I wanted to do. But
Mm-hmm.
she was surprised that, like, internally, it wouldn't feel like I really had kind of a connection, though, to that person who was doing those things, I guess, is kind of a good way
Interesting.
to yeah, to put it. Yeah. Because it is kind of true, like, as a psychopathic person, you know, kind of like really low empathy. Like, I do think that in a lot of ways, I am very little affected by other people, their expectations, their whatever, their opinions of me, like super, like just kind of Teflon about it. And then in other ways, though, since I never had kind of like this strong sense of like, this is who I am, you know, and like this kind of personal momentum, I guess, or personal velocity about me. In other ways, I was really affected by kind of
Hmm.
less about kind of probably what specific people thought and more kind of affected by just the context I found myself in, kind of the way that a chameleon, you know, almost can't help but like change based
Yeah.
on what circumstance they're in. And so I kind of
Yeah.
felt like that was kind of an issue. So I wouldn't say it came from at all from a place of people pleasing, but I think it kind of resulted in similar things as people pleasing
Hmm.
because I would end up doing stuff where I'd be like, why am I doing this? You know, what am I even,
Mm-hmm.
do I enjoy this? What does it mean to enjoy something? You know, I would kind of
Yeah.
wonder, you know, kind of get started down these paths that I don't feel like I had actually chosen. You know, sometimes
Mm.
I would, sometimes I'd be like really my girlfriend calls it the thing is highlighted in her mind. You know, sometimes I'd have like almost a fixation or obsession. And those times always felt the best because I think I did have that personal velocity. So I think of like when I
Yeah.
use that word, I think of like being on a bike. And the faster you're going to a point, actually, the faster you're going, the more stable you are. Like if you're going
Yeah.
very, very slow on a bike, then it feels very unstable. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feels like you're putting in a lot of work just to kind of stand still, basically. And I think that that can be really frustrating for people. But when you feel kind of motivated by something that you know is kind of like part of your life's purpose, I guess is a quick and dirty way to say it, then it feels really good. It doesn't feel hard. You know, it feels almost like you're
Yeah.
swimming with the current.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So have you, I mean, like, what have you learned in this past little thing?
Um, I think for me, mm, I think I'm still kind of sorting through like, okay, if I like, let's say for example, because this actually did happen, you know, let's say someone reads the book that I'm working on and has a thought about how one of my characters should be. Like, I kind of have started like sorting through like, okay, like what piece of that advice do I want to keep? Do I even, like this is this person's opinion. Is this like an opinion that I want to think more on, or is this an opinion that I just want to let go of and kind of let my original idea stand? And I think just working through that has been good. And even just like figuring out like what parts of the process of something that I enjoy. Um,
Mm.
like kind of like again with my novel, just like daydreaming and like thinking, oh, what if this happened? What if that happened? What if how would this character respond to this situation? I find that part really fun.
Hmm.
But the going back and revising and making sure that everything like fits and has a purpose, I'm like, why can't that just happen because it's fun to have happen? Like, why does it have to further the plot?
Mm.
And like, I don't know, like, does everything in life further the plot? No, not necessarily. Sometimes you just go on a roller coaster because you feel like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's why I am hoping to save some of those fun ideas for like short stories or something where it's like this doesn't have to, it can be a narrative in and of itself. It can just be a fun thing that I write about. Um, so that's been good, a fun discovery. Um, and I think like in terms of having a purpose, like I'm learning to kind of be okay with change and be okay with letting go of things that I thought were my purpose or maybe were my purpose for a time, and just
Mm.
kind of recognizing when they don't serve me anymore or when I'm more passionate about something else, and that it's not that I quit or that I gave up. It's just like that is not the time for this anymore. Like I'm a very firm believer that there's like a certain time for everything. And that's why I love the question you've mentioned a few times that your therapist would ask, like, what uh if there were no one else in the world, what would you do right now? I love that question. I ask myself that question all the time because then it's like, okay, right now my body needs a nap, or oh, my right now I need to work on this thing. I'm really passionate and excited to work on it. And I find it's easier most of the time to go through life that way when you can. And I don't know, because it's like it's time. It's time for this thing to happen. So I think just the idea of like, when is it time? And even I was thinking about this today, even with my book. So these characters popped into my head, you know, 15 years ago, and I've been writing about them ever since. And um, I'm kind of like, well, gee, I could have published a whole series by now if I'd had, better circumstances or different circumstances or different people around me or whatever. But then I was like, well, hang on, like there might be a time for this book to come. Like there might be like a contextual time for it to be published whenever that is going to happen. And even if it's not going to happen, like what if it's just something that brings joy to my life and to the lives of those who've had the chance to look at it now. Um and it's I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I hadn't worked on it. So it's like all these things, and even with the other people who've come into my life, um, just like there's all these circumstances that wouldn't have come about earlier if it had gotten published earlier, or if I hadn't followed this trains that I have followed to where I am now, particularly with the uh, psychopathy. I don't want to call, well, okay, it's research. Um,
Mm.
qualitative research that I've been doing, and just like talking to people and learning more about it and learning about the lived experience of it. Um, I would not have been ready for that before now, I don't think.
Oh,
Um,
really? What do you mean by
yeah,
that?
I, I think I was, I grew up in a very black and white environment, and like there was good and bad, and I think that a lot of times, I mean, it's interesting because I was taught that people can rationally know right from wrong and like make choices rationally. They don't necessarily need empathy to make choices that are not destructive to themselves or others. But there was also just this idea of like, mm, I think just like the way, um, the way I thought about things, it was like, oh, this person probably, did these malicious behaviors because they are a sociopath, or like, that like it wasn't really like, well, like now I see it more as, okay, this person did these things because they are currently making choices that are not um what's the word I want to use? Beneficial to them and other, well, maybe to them it is. I don't know, but like they're just not making super awesome choices right now. Instead of like blaming it on a condition,
Mm.
I mean, it'd be kind of like someone saying like, oh, well, you can't read because you're blind, which I am. I'm blind. You can't read because you're blind. And me going, well, actually, I have this phone that can take pictures of stuff and read it to me. So I actually can read in a
Mm.
different way. So like,
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So I think just like at the time in my life, when I was younger, I was just so black and white. Things were less nuanced for me. So I wouldn't have been ready to kind of give people the benefit of the doubt and like really truly get to know them, or even just like, I mean, I have a friend um that I met through your Discord server, and every now and then she's just like, I like, if we stopped talking I wouldn't care. And I'm like, okay, like that's where you're at. Like, whereas before, like a long time ago, I probably would have taken that personally and been really offended. And right
Yeah.
now, I'm just like, well, that's kind of fascinating. Tell me more about that. Because, like, obviously, we're talking. So, what is it that is interesting you about this right
Mm.
now? Like, so, yeah. So it's very interesting. I'm at a place right now where I'm able to like receive people where they're at a lot
Mm.
more, and not have my preconceived notions about who they are or who they should be, and just like let them be who they are. And trying to give myself that same mindset towards myself is hard, but I'm hoping that if I can apply it to other people, eventually it will just become a second nature thing where I'm just like, oh, this is where Casey's at today, like this is what's up.
Wow.
So yeah, so I think just it's funny because like people say that like the older you get, kind of the more set in your ways you get. And I took a journalism class, and we talked about advertising in college, and they said like, they want to advertise to young people because young people are not set in their ways, and they do not want
Mm.
to, they don't want to buy the same thing all the time like the older generations do. And I remember thinking to myself, I never want to be that way. Like, I never want to be so set in my ways that I can't change or can't be excited by something new. And so it's kind of cool to see, like, as I'm getting older, I'm actually getting less set in my ways and kind of more open-minded. At least I hope that's what's happening. Um, so it's pretty cool to do that, and to do things that most people wouldn't think of doing. It's funny when people find out that I am on. So I was talking to some friends about Discord because they're
Mm.
switching stuff over to Discord. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm on Discord. I've been on Discord for like a year. And they're like, oh, are you a gamer? And I'm like, well, no, actually, I'm on a psychopathy Discord. And I explain about my book, and I explain about like what I'm doing. And they're like, there was just like silence. And I'm like, so what's up? And they're like, wow, like that's that is not what I was expecting you to say.
Mm.
um and they're just like, wow, like when your book becomes published and I read it, I'm gonna know you like lived among them virtually. I'm like, yeah. It kind of is. I mean, like, there's one friend and I, we talk like every day, like we message every day, so it's like I know I know a little more about like what her, and I think too, just like having such an open and honest relationship, like that's what I end up saying, like when she says things like I don't, like I don't care about you as much as I used to, or like, oh,
Hmm.
um, whatever, whatever it might be. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, um, oh, what was I going to say? I had a point to this thought. Give me 1 second. Um, oh no, it's gone. Well, I think just, when she says stuff like that, it's like, it's just easier for me to be like, oh, okay, like that's where you're at today. But yesterday it was something different. So maybe tomorrow it will be something different, because I kind of have more of like that wider view of how she's going through life right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the thought, but if it comes back, I'll say whatever it was. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting to have that um really broad intimate perspective. Oh, and I remember what I was going to say. So I also, like, we both agreed that we would just be really honest with each other. Um, and she actually said to me one time, she's like, "You're the person I've been the most honest with ever." And I'm like, "Wow, that is huge." Um, so like when she says things like that, that might upset me, or that had the potential to upset me, I just say, well, thank you for your honesty. Like, thank you. I want to know, like, I'm very rare in the fact that I want to know where I stand with people. I remember when my husband and I first got married, I like asked him a question, and he's like, "Do you want the answer that like other people would want to hear, or do you want to know like what I really think?" And I was like, "I want to know what you really think." And he told me what he really thought, and it was about something dumb, like, I don't know, like dishes, or like something like annoying that he found about me. And I was like, he's like, "I'm really sorry. Like, I you want to be honest answer?" I'm like, "Yes, I did. Like, that is exactly what I want. Like, if something isn't working, or if you're feeling a certain way, like, I'd rather know than have you like pretend that everything is cool." So I think I'm unique in that I just like want to know kind of where I stand with people. And so honesty is a really important value for me in my friendships, and in my just like everyday like dealings. And it's I think it's partly because I've noticed this tendency, and I know we talked about this a little bit in our last conversation, just in my tendency to like kind of lie, not quite lie, but like to sugarcoat things to kind of people please, and like, oh yeah, everything's fine, harmonize and be like, we're all good. And I'm trying to be more honest myself. So I'm hoping that if I surround myself with people who are not afraid to be their authentic selves, that it will help inspire me to do that as well. And like, and I can even tell it's like starting to happen. Like, I'm starting to be more like, no, I actually don't want to do that. Or, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. I actually do want to do that. Or, I do want to hang out with this person. Or, oh no, I don't. Like, just because like I have been around people who are just unabashedly like saying what they think and feel, and it's helping me to be honest with myself. So that's cool.
It's interesting what you just said. Do you feel like before you were not being honest with yourself, or like what was the process? Maybe it has to do with, like you said before, you were kind of more in this kind of black and white way of seeing things. Like, I guess why, well, yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. I think for me, it was like, there's this box or that box. You either fit here or here. And so I was trying to make myself fit in certain places, where I didn't really feel like I fit, but I was trying to like kind of fake it. Um, so I am making a decision about if I want to talk about something or not. Yeah, why
Okay.
not? Okay, so I am I'm on the LGBT spectrum,
Mm,
and I am also Catholic. And it took me a very long time to come to terms with how I view those things, because for a while I saw them as conflicting. And
mm,
so when I was in like LGBT spaces, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of almost didn't really want to talk about my religion, because like some people would like start hating on like oh yeah, the church and blah, like whatever the opinion they had about it. And I was just like, well, that's awkward, because I actually don't agree with a lot of those things that the church is doing, but I'm still Catholic, but you're going to think this about me because I'm Catholic. And then in Catholic spaces, I didn't really want it to come out that I was LGBT, because they would have all their opinions about what I was doing. And it's like, well, actually, I'm living according to church teaching. I just have these experiences. Yeah, this is awkward. So
mm,
like for a long time, I would like put myself in these boxes, and this is just one example. Like these two boxes of, okay, am I in a Catholic space or am I in an LGBT space? Like, who
mm,
do I need to be today? Can I be gay Casey or can I be Catholic Casey? And so,
yeah.
like, the more I have grown and again, like, just searched and found people who are being their authentic selves, like, I, um, I have found spaces where there are people who are like me. They are living according to Catholic Church teaching, but they're also like honest about their LGBT stuff. And
Mm,
so like I describe it as like being able to bring my whole self to space. So can I bring my whole self? And usually when I'm in a space where I don't feel safe, it's because I can't bring my whole self. Whether
mm,
that is with my family or with friends that I haven't come out to, or like people that I know are like um just that might not receive me well, when there's like a risk of that. And so like I um I think being more honest about who I am and just being with people with whom I can be my full self and bring my full self. I think that has also become very liberating too, because then I don't have to people please, because I can just be who I am and not have to figure out who to be to certain people. Um, so yeah, and I've also found uh, being friends with my friends who experience psychopathy very refreshing in that way too, because even though some of them are not religious, they are very open to me being me, and like they ask me questions about it and they're curious about it, and like we just um we just share about who we are, and as we make discoveries, like there's not, I think what it is there's in the world there's this idea that you have to know who you are and you have to present that to the world, and you have to do that by the time you're like 18 and 25 at the latest. By the time you're 25 you really need to know who you are. And so like knowing that these people are, I mean, everyone's on a journey, people just aren't honest about it always, or
yeah.
maybe they are, and that's why there's so many self-help books, I don't know. But just like knowing that knowing that my friends who experience psychopathy aren't like faking it, at least not to me. Like they are on the journey and they're figuring out who they are. And so it's okay for me to be on that journey and figure out who I am. And like, yeah, whereas with like with other people, and again, I don't know, maybe I have friends that I think are normal, but actually have psychopathy too. I really don't know. That'd be like my dream to have somebody be like, hey, by the way, I'm a psychopath. I would flip out. I'd be like, oh my God, let's sit down and talk. I have so many questions for you. Um, but yeah, so when I'm around other people who I think already feel like they know who I am, it happens a lot with my family. Like
Mm,
they think they know who I am, and so I have to be uh I have to be a certain person, and I can't stray from that, or else like they don't want to talk about it. Like when I try and bring up other things, they're just like, oh, we're gonna pretend that Casey's straight, or whatever the case may be. So um yeah, end of thought. I don't know.
mm.
Yeah. So it's very cool to be friends with people who are just super honest about like, yeah, I'm still learning about myself. And, like I, uh, in order to get out of that dark time that I was in earlier this year, I started taking some antidepressants, and just like being able to be honest with my psychopath friends, because some of them are on antidepressants too. And I'm just like, yeah, this happened. Here we go. I'm on drugs now. Like
Mhm.
there wasn't that same stigma that, oh yeah, me too. I hope it helps you. It's really helped me, or like whatever, like it's just cool to have that honest relationship with people. I don't think I wish more normal people strove for that, but it's very rare, in my opinion, to find people who are truly interested in being like authentic and even just like willing to communicate and interested in like building a friendship. And I think at least the people with psychopathy that I've been talking to, like even though they might not feel a connection, they recognize that they want it. And so like they're willing to put in a lot more effort. At least I don't know. I actually don't know that. I should probably ask them that. I don't know. But it seems like they're willing to put in a lot more effort than most people, because they don't take it for granted. Like when they find someone who's interesting, they're like, oh, wow, I'm fascinated by something. But again, I'm gonna have to check that assumption out, because I just realized it just now. This is what happens when I talk with people. I like verbally process and then I realize something. And I'm like, wait, is that actually true? I should probably check on that, because I'm just literally having this brainstorm right at this moment. So if it's part of your experience, I'd love to hear about that. But if it's not part of your experience, then no big deal.
Is what part of my experience?
Oh, just like when you find someone that you find really interesting, um, is it really kind of like invigorating and you just kind of want to like interact with them because they're interesting?
Yeah, I think that they're and this I kind of have to like go back to earlier years, because I feel like
Yeah,
my experience is different now. But earlier
that's
years,
fair.
yeah, yeah, when I would become, I guess there were two types of people that I would feel connected to. People that I was kind of fixated on in like probably in an objectifying way. Not
Mm,
sexually or whatever, but just kind of like
right.
fixated on, and then
Yeah,
like a new toy type of thing, even though I didn't
fair.
like abuse them.
Right.
Not intend to abuse them. And then other people where I think I was just surprised how authentic they were compared to,
Mm,
I think a phrase, I hope this phrase starts catching on, because chicken people, and chicken people are, I think, kind of what you described before, people that really believe in the boxes and that everybody should fit in
yeah.
these boxes and kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
enforce their box rules on everybody. And you're like,
Yes.
whoa, okay. Like this is
Yeah.
all just like made up in your head. Do you kind of
Uh-huh.
see that? But they get really like emotionally and even kind of morally invested in it, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes you
Yeah.
come upon somebody that seemed a little bit more open-minded and
Hmm.
didn't seem like they were kind of like body snatched that way, like chicken people
Yes.
seem to me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I agree. And even just like interesting conversation. Like, I don't know, like uh if it's okay to share this, before we started recording, you mentioned you were gonna go make your magic cup. And
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, like who says that? That is so cool. Like
Magic cup.
it's just kind of off the wall stuff. Like my friends will like send me random YouTube videos of like, I don't know, like the history of pants, or like a random song that they're into. And like, no, people just aren't that fun. They're like, we're just kind of boring sometimes, because we're like, I don't know, like I don't know if it's like I don't know if it's like less, it's probably just we're like less spontaneous. Um and again, with that authenticity, like if I was like, oh, I just watched uh or I just read an article about like using the radio to listen for meteors. like my psychopath friend probably would have shared that with me, like, no, hands down, like, oh, here, this cool thing I found. Here you go, check it out. Whereas
Mm.
like me, I'm like thinking like, oh, are
Mm.
people gonna like that? Like, what if people think that I'm weird? Like, well, it's just like less, it's just less spontaneous. And I think it's really cool to have friends who are more spontaneous because they like our conversations just go in like the craziest directions and it's great. Um, anyway, I feel like a
Yeah.
commercial. This is why you should be friends with a psychopath. Anyway.
I love this though. I'm gonna love this to hear this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's as long as like you have a a framework for like these are things we agree upon, like, and these are things that like we respect each other's boundaries. And I mean, and this is stuff that all friends should talk about, but they
Mm.
don't. Like, one time, so my one of my friends is we like to have tea and talk about stuff. Sometimes we drink tea, sometimes we drink like whatever we're drinking. Sometimes we don't
Uh-huh.
drink anything, but we call it having tea. And so like um like I would be like, well, I she'll be like, oh, you want to have tea today? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like maybe later because I'm kind of tired. And she's like, you can say no. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, oh yeah. Okay, not today.
Mm.
um and, and there was one point where I kind of realized like, hey, I realized that like I'm only asking to have tea when I'd like to have tea. So like, how do you feel about that? And
Mm.
like, do you feel, like when you ask to have tea, I'm always like, nah, like what's up? Like, I feel like I'm being a bad friend. And, and she was just like, well, I mean, part of me disappointed because we didn't have tea in a while, but another part of me just kind of doesn't care. I'm like, that's fair. Like, like, so just like having similar values of like, okay, we're not gonna like if we get mad at each other, we're gonna talk about it and communicate about it and not like verbally spew vomit on each other verbally, or like, like it's just like, okay, if we can't do something or if we don't feel like talking, we're going to tell each other instead of like ghosting each other for that day.
Oh.
Just like things like that like um that are really it's refreshing when you agree on those things, or even like, I don't know, like um one time one of my psychopath friends said like, oh, like that thing that I said to you like 3 months ago, I was like trying to, like, I wanted to manipulate that situation and I wanted to like cause something to happen for you. And I was like, oh, like that, this is fascinating, let's talk about it because I'm weird. And like and I was like, also it's really interesting that you felt comfortable saying that to me, even though like I totally could have been like, well, forget you, I guess we're not friends anymore because you wanted to like cause pain or whatever. um but like just like having that authentic like, and I'm like, and this is why I wasn't worried about this because like, you know I think being friends over the internet helps too because there's like this anonymity and there's like less manipulation that can happen, because we're not physically in the same proximity. I think that helps me feel a little bit um safer. And I don't know, I've never been friends with a psychopath in real life. I never have, like outside of like talking online and knowing that I've never known someone in my real life who was like, yeah, this is a thing that I have to deal with. So that would actually be really interesting. um but yeah, it's end of thought again.
Mhm. Yeah, my friend, if I think you said you read the book, but my friend Anne
Yes,
in the
I did.
book, yeah, she
Yes.
said like kind of throughout our friendship that that's one of her favorite things about being my friend is that if I'm
Mm,
disgruntled with her in any way, she'll know it. And so she never
yeah,
has to wonder, she never has to question,
yeah,
hey, is this
that's cool. Yeah, I loved that part, that it was just like, it seems like such a pivotal a point for both of you,
hmm,
and it was a cool thing to read about. um because yeah, most people most people don't talk about friendship that way. Like most people are like, oh yeah, there's this person, they're my friend, it's great. But
Mm.
they don't really think about like this is the impact that this person had on me and that I had on them. And like I think it's really cool to reflect on our relationships in that way. Like because we're all impacting each other for better or for worse, or sometimes for worse and then it gets better if you like have a villain who taught you something. Um, like the lady who fired me from my job a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
Learned a lot from her. So it's just yeah, it's just really cool to reflect on how we impact each other. And I think it can kind of add a layer of, you talk about the meaning and significance and all that. Like I think it can add a layer of significance. Like um, like I like to um, tell my psychopath friends sometimes, like, hey, like, because sometimes, she'll be in a rut where she's like, I just don't care. Like, what is it even all for? Like, I don't even care. And I'm just like, well, these are all the great things that our friendship has done in my life so that you matter to me. Like, whether you matter to yourself or not, like, you're impacting someone. And I think we all need to hear that. We all need to hear like this is this is a good thing that is coming out of your existence because sometimes it can be really hard to keep existing, especially when you feel like um, there's no point or like if things aren't going the way that you had hoped. It can be hard to keep going in
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah. Trying to figure out if this is a good time to transition into um, well, I know when we messaged initially, we were talking about emotional safety. And then you brought up a story earlier when we were chatting that you thought you might want to tell. I'm just trying to
Mm.
figure out like where intuitively, like where our convo is going.
Uh-huh.
So
And what does your
I don't know
intuition tell you?
I was gonna ask you the same thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, hmm. Let's see. We talked a little bit about the different you also mentioned something too about like why each of us like conforms slash people pleases. And I don't know if we've like sufficiently covered that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah,
You want to talk about that?
we can. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
If that's what my intuition said. So we can go
Nice.
there.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I'll talk a little bit about this because I you've been talking, I think, kind of about some of the boxes and why you conform. Well, I meant to ask you though, like, what would you say are some of the motives, kind of some of the incentives or some of the pros?
Mm,
Because you've talked about some of the cons of living that box life, putting yourself in
yeah,
a box, putting other people in boxes. What are some of the pros, I think? Because there's a reason why people do choose that.
absolutely. Um I think some of the pros are like you don't have to think as much about who you are because you just conform to this box and you're like, oh, I'm this person. So this means I behave in this way and I probably ascribe to these beliefs and I probably like this and that. And so like it's kind of easy in the sense that like you don't have to do the work to like figure out who you are.
Mm.
Um, and that can be nice, especially when life is just extra complicated because sometimes life just gets really complicated and you just need to like, okay, I'm gonna be on autopilot for a while and not think about anything too deep because I need to literally like figure out how to do all these things in my life.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I
or like
pause
when
you
you're
right there?
processing,
Oh yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, or like when you're processing trauma, it can be good to just
Oh,
have a role to play so that you don't have to like worry too much about um like trying to figure that out because you're dealing with your trauma.
yeah. Yeah, I think about
So
that sometimes, this idea of like, I think it's interesting what you said. Like, if you choose a box, I don't know, let's say a box of like hero firefighter. Let's just use that one
Hmm.
because I think a
Yeah,
lot of kind
sure.
of kids or whatever, or even adults are like, this is nice and easy, hero firefighter. And then you kind of know what's going on. And it's sometimes when, I live in California and there's like a little bit of a obsession maybe with like recycling, like
Mhm.
controversial topic, whether it matters, this stuff just get
No, I
thrown
love
away
recycling.
anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I got you.
But
Yeah, that's
sometimes I
true
get
too.
like a piece of packaging that's mixed. It's like cardboard, it's
Right.
paper or
What
something,
do
and then
you
there's
do?
plastic. Yeah, there's a plastic window. And I often think, what's up with this plastic window? Why are they putting these little plastic windows? But I think it is like it must help the marketing of the product.
Yeah.
People like to see what you're going to get. And I
Yeah.
think that is
Yeah.
kind of one of the pros of like choosing a box to put yourself in, is that you're
Mhm.
like, well, I can already see what I'm getting, hero firefighter. It's like the plastic window kind of approach to life. And if you're
Yeah.
doing something more like I guess the other option other than plastic window box is, have you ever shopped one of these mystery boxes? I'm a swimmer, right? Like
No,
I,
but
I
that sounds fun.
exercise. Yeah. I swim for exercise, but I'm kind of like, well, some of these swimsuits, I don't care what they look like because I'm just wearing them in the pool. No one
Right.
sees, no one cares. And they get like thrashed so quickly in the chlorine and the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do these like
Yeah.
mystery boxes. They'll just send them in my size, but whatever color of like Speedo swimsuit.
Nice.
And that's kind of like, I guess what it's like to not not put yourself in a box, one of these plastic window boxes, is you really
Yeah.
don't know what you're gonna get. And I think, I mean, yeah, I can kind of see like the advantages when you kind of say that that's your only other choice is to just kind of like wing it. It's the like maybe you'll
Yeah.
meet somebody like I think people worry, that they're not adequate, they're not lovable, that there's something dark about
Mhm.
them, that there's something I think they're worried kind of like that they're going to end up digging up some stuff that's going to be overwhelming to them. I don't know that they feel like they have the courage, the fortitude, the skills, the mindset to be able to deal with whatever comes their way when they're
Yeah.
taking a look inside.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it can come from like wanting people to like you and knowing that people will like you if you live in a box.
Yeah, you're
Um,
choosing
you know,
outcomes. You're
yeah.
Yeah, it is outcome versus process. You're like, instead of just
Yeah.
being who I am and trusting in the process, I just want to know what's going to happen. I want to know what the result is going to be.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
But
But
you're
yeah.
also commodifying yourself. That commodification, a fancy word I learned in law school. So, like you're treating yourself as like currency. You're
Hmm.
trading, you're trading your parts of yourself for outcomes. And
Yeah.
how is that different? Like we can think, when has that ever worked out well? When people are selling themselves.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't. Um, and it's kind of like um the more I uh the more I've tried to be authentic and like just the more I've accepted, and welcomed other people's authenticity. Like I kind of describe it or think, your box analogy with the window is kind of cool. But I was also thinking like when you're being the authentic self, it's like you're kind of like a gift. Like you're wrapped up in
Mm,
wrapping paper and you're like you don't, no one knows what's underneath, and it can be like really super surprising. And like, if somebody unwraps and gets under that layer and they decide that they don't like what
yeah.
they see, then that's on them. It's not on you. Like, it's like, if you got the, uh, one time I participated in one of those like, it
Gift
wasn't quite Secret
exchange.
Santa. It was like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a white elephant gift exchange at work. And like, I had this Green Bay Packers, checkers set, and the yeah, and the person who opened it was like she like makes her own yogurt. She's like very much not sporty in that way. And
Mhm.
she was like, "Oh, thank you. This is great." And I could tell she like wasn't excited about it.
Uh-huh.
But she just randomly chose it. It wasn't like, I didn't give it
Yeah.
to her. But but I talked to her about it later. I was like, "So yeah, that was I was kind of surprised by your reaction of like how, excited you were, even though I could tell that she was pretending." And then she's like, "Well, the thing is, I'm going to a gift exchange this weekend with a whole bunch of my lesbian sporty friends, and they are going to fight over this Green Bay Packers checkers set." And so
Yeah.
like maybe you are not the type of gift that that person was expecting, but there's probably someone else who is going to appreciate you for who you are. And like, I've kind of found like in my life, I'm like, okay, moving on. Like, if I'm trying for a certain relationship and it just isn't working out, like, like I keep things cordial and I don't like tell the person, well, I guess we're not friends, but like I can just kind of, I feel more free to like move on and see if there's other people who might appreciate my authenticity a little more. Um, and
That's a good
yeah.
point too, because not all kind of restaurants are this way, but sometimes like there's a restaurant where I can smell it almost before I see it, the restaurant, the type
Mm,
of food or whatever.
yeah.
And imagine if you're that type of restaurant, like for certain people, they're gonna be like, oh, I'm hungry for this now. Now that I smell it, I'm hungry
Yeah.
for this thing. But that's the kind of sad thing about these people who choose the plastic window boxes over kind of being their authentic self, is they're sending the wrong kind of pheromones out into the world.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
everybody wants to be around people who accept you and appreciate you for who you are, like, as you said
Yeah.
kind of earlier, accept 100% of you, the full you. But if you're
Mhm.
not even being the full you, how would you even
Yeah.
expect people to like smell it in the air and like seek you out, so
Absolutely.
to speak?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is what I realized. I kind of came to this realization of like, okay, like I need to start sharing with people who I am, but I also need to make sure that it's an emotionally safe space for me to do that. And so kind of like evaluating that, um and now I feel like the majority of people that I spend my time with are people that I can bring my whole self to, which is super cool. And even in places that you wouldn't expect, like at work, I feel like I can bring my whole self. um and I it's almost kind of jarring when I meet someone or when I'm in a situation where I can't bring my whole self, or when I realize I can't, because I'm so used to just like being who I am now, um and just kind of avoiding those situations where, and being honest with myself, like, do I really want to be in a situation where I can't bring my whole self? No, I don't. So I'm just gonna minimize my time there, or I'm just gonna, you know, only stay for like an hour, or I'm not gonna go at all. And like, just like giving myself permission to be like, okay, like let's let's stop pretending. And I think too, like, it just creates so much more openness and intimacy and friendship in your relationships if you have people in your life that you can bring your whole self to that relationship. And I mean, they also say like you become most like the five people you spend the most time with. So I I guess it makes sense, like as you become more authentically who you are, you're going to attract people who have that authenticity um with,
Yeah, I would
themselves.
say, yeah, the causal relationship probably goes the opposite there. The five people you spend most time with are probably, you're going to end up choosing the ones that most kind of reflect who you are, is my guess on
Mm,
causation. But I can see
yeah.
why people would kind of think, hey, yeah, they're rubbing off on me. But it could be that they're just kind of, because I definitely think when I sought out Anne's friendship in my life, it was not because I wanted to become like her, wanted to kind of have her
Mhm.
rub off on me. But I think I've understood kind of very intuitively, like in a way that I didn't acknowledge or could kind of recognize at the time, that there were parts about her and kind of the way that she saw people that would allow parts of me that I wasn't
Mm.
finding expression for, self-expression
Sure, that
for.
makes
And
sense.
yeah, in that time period. So that's what I sought out. I don't think I was necessarily kind of like, oh, she has XYZ traits that I want to
Hmm.
kind of, adopt in my own life. If anything, it was like I
Yeah,
have XYZ traits and she's okay with them. She's going to
yeah.
allow me to be
I
kind
wonder
of
where
more who I
that,
am.
yeah, I wonder where that idea came from that like you become, and I mean, I guess like
I've never heard that
it,
phrase
because
before.
yeah, it's business people talk about it all the time. They're like, oh yeah, if you hang out with millionaires, you'll be more likely to to hopefully maybe someday become a millionaire.
Well, again, though, I do think
So
that that's true, is that they can unlock like your inner millionaire, so to speak, because I think,
yeah,
unfortunately, when we're around people, a lot of times their influence is limiting rather than enabling.
yes, yes. I think that is the context in which the spirit and context in which that advice is good is like be around people who don't limit you, because if you are around people who do limit you, and I mean it's kind of like with the whole boxes thing, like if you are around people who are just like appreciating your plastic window box, you're never going to show who you really are because you don't have to,
Well, and
and you're
these
not even allowed to.
Yeah, and these are people too who are so afraid of taking risks that they would rather force you to be less than you are. They'd rather choose to themselves be less than they are. They'd rather kind of have like all of life be a farce, like
Mm-hmm.
this, like a facade, like this fake kind of like there's nothing behind it, superficial interactions. They'd rather that than to, open up the present in the gift
Yeah,
exchange. They'd rather
yeah,
keep stealing from other people than just
yeah,
choose a present that remains unopened and take that risk.
yeah, yeah. I love this.
It's funny. I've noticed that my family started doing gift exchange like that for Christmas because like the children are at an age now where they can be stolen from and not all cry. There's just a couple more
Yes.
that can cry.
Yeah.
So we do that, and it is funny, like, the kids are so much more likely to open the gifts, and the adults are so
Mhm.
much more likely to steal the gifts. Part of it is you're stealing
Yeah.
it from, a kid gets, like, a scented candle or something, and
Right.
you're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
steal that from me, use
You're not going to
you."
use this. Yeah.
But there
Yeah,
is
that
kind
makes
of like
sense.
the
Huh.
older we get, like, this reluctance to take risks where kids all the time
Yeah.
are so engaged with life in this very exploratory way. They're so willing to
Hmm.
just open the door and see, to just try.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My intuition's saying this is a good pivot point to transition to our emotional safety conversation. Are you
Excellent.
feeling that
Let's
way
do it.
too?
Yes.
All right.
Let's do it.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think I've uncovered a lot of stuff. I love talking to you because I always feel like I uncover a lot of stuff. Um, and you help me uncover a lot of stuff too, which is great. Um, so, so this idea of uh, bringing your whole self and feeling like emotionally safe. And when I messaged you, I know I approached it from like, for me, I tried to make myself feel emotionally safe by kind of like people pleasing and sort of conforming to what other people wanted or what they thought or what I thought that they wanted. Sometimes it isn't even what they want, it's what I think that they want. And then, and I know that I've listened to a few of your interviews where some people who experience personality disorders have said that that is why they manipulate or control a situation because they want to feel emotionally safe and they want to they want to know what to expect about what's going on. And I know you talked about that just now when we were talking about the plastic window box life. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so I just kind of wanted to explore like, so as a person with psychopathy, um, who is trying to get to know who they really are, like how does emotional safety play into that about like deciding deciding to kind of let let things be as they are instead of trying to um, make situations as you might hope that they could be, if that makes sense. And if you have
Yes.
other thoughts about this too, feel free to share.
Yeah. So I'm trying to look up this poem that I love, kind of something that you said earlier. I'm trying to Google it, but I have a photo of it. I can find it. Uh, I bet. Don't worry, I will find it.
It's okay. I can wait.
uh, yeah. So kind of while we're talking about this, I'm really glad that you asked this question, because I think about this question like quite a bit. Especially, I think you're right that, as we kind of talked about before, there are reasons why a psychopath might choose, and we kind of didn't talk about this yet. There's reason though why a psychopath might choose the box with the plastic window. And I think it tends to be just really different. It tends to just be like, okay, um, this is the uh, like kind of the most convenient thing that can be done in this particular situation. This is
Mm,
uh, almost like a manipulative way, but also in kind of this self-protective way to kind of simplify
sure.
things, to be like, a psychopath is so outcome oriented, tends to be, I
Yeah.
think, in general, that it's just easier to constantly choose that. But there's also kind of this other flip side to it, which is that um, you don't have like a sense of self to even express. So you're not kind
Mm,
of sacrificing the same things that a normal person is. I mean, you are. You're still truly
hmm.
making that
Right.
sacrifice. You're just kind of is you're not aware of it, like you
Yeah.
don't
It doesn't
feel
hit in
kind
the
of
same
like,
way.
yeah, you don't feel that sense of self-betrayal. And I've said this before, that
Yeah.
that sense of self-betrayal is kind of actually what is happening with like guilt. That guilt to a large extent is
Mm,
just
yep.
betraying yourself,
It's like
because
I
you have,
didn't live up to, yeah, I didn't live up to who I think I am or who I want to be, or yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense.
And if you don't have
Mm,
that sense of who you are or who you want to be, then you don't have there's no you to betray, there's no sense of self to
yeah.
kind of betray there. Um, so I think, uh, yeah, I might not be able to find this Ed poem. How
Okay.
no? I'll give it one more try. If not, I'll just kind of have to tell you what the plot of this poem is, because it's one of
Yeah.
these poems that have a plot. Those usually are the
Oh,
only
cool.
poems that I understand anyways.
Yeah, that's
So,
fair.
and it's so sad. Hopefully somebody will be able to like look this up. Oh, doesn't it seem like Google has gotten worse too?
Yes, I agree. I've Googled the same words and found totally different things many times. I
Okay,
don't
I
know what's
did
up with
find it.
Google. Yay.
All right, Ed. Ed was in love with a cocktail waitress, but Ed's family and his friends didn't approve, so he broke it off. He married a respectable woman who played the piano. She played well enough to have been a professional. Ed's wife left him. Years later, at a family gathering, Ed got drunk and made a fool of himself. He said, I should have married Doreen. Well, they said, why didn't you? And the poet is
Ooh,
Lewis Simpson.
wow.
I love
Man,
that
and that's
poem.
see, yeah, and it's like huge life choices like that. Like, like he was assuming that his family thought a certain way, and they were just like, no, like, why didn't you make that choice? You
Yeah,
could
why
have
didn't
all this
you?
time.
Even
All
if they
this time
didn't
you could have.
approve, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
too, in a
exactly.
way, maybe they would have gotten more pleasure out of their
Mhm.
own life if they could always look down on Ed and his cocktail waitress Doreen, we often think, oh, this is like the thing everybody wants me to do. And if I don't do it, then they're going to be worse off. But sometimes the thing that somebody wants is to complain, when you realize
Yeah.
that kind of even like their words don't really reflect their true preferences. I think
Mhm.
like it's
Mhm.
just easier to kind of not take them seriously, because I don't think they're saying things always in a serious way, in a way that's kind of like, this is my true request. But I think, I mean, that's like kind of a big thing, is communication in general. But when you first
Yes.
asked me this question, getting back to the second part of what you said, on this pivot, I thought of, and this has changed now. In the Mormon temple, And it's changed recently, the language, so I feel especially
Hmm.
fine sharing the previous language because apparently that's
Okay.
not the language anymore or whatever.
Okay.
But,
That's fair.
one of the things with, so the language is the same, but it does kinda get changed. One of the reasons why I think it gets changed is because there are different, like, words that mean something one way, and people
Hmm.
will interpret it one way. Words
And
change.
then it culturally changes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cultural changes. Like, I was just
Yeah.
reading that I guess when you say Chat GPT and you say it with a French accent, then it sounds like the cat farted.
Huh. That's funny.
In French. So they're constantly saying the
Huh.
cat farted. Yeah, chat GPT.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So, and there's some other instances of this where you like learn like famous trademarks or something had to change in a different culture because
Hmm.
that's really like a dirty word or
Yeah.
something. They can't use that
The
word.
the Nova car,
Oh,
it
really?
didn't sell
Oh, yeah.
in Spanish
Nova.
speaking
Mhm.
countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, it literally means no go.
They're like,
Yeah, no, we shouldn't buy this car. It won't
yeah.
move. Do they sell it without the engine? Batteries
These
not included?
idiots. Yeah. Why would they name it this?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So in this particular kind of temple ceremony though, uh it it depicts it's the endowment ceremony if people want to look this up a little bit. It depicts the now it goes even earlier. It depicts before the creation. So it kind of like think
Hmm,
Genesis. Genesis, yeah, 1
okay.
and 2. And it
Yeah.
has like and if you want to know like most of the language either comes from Genesis or comes from the Mormon scripture, which is called Moses. So if
Okay.
you look up the book, you can look this up. Moses, a lot of it's just lifted straight from the scriptures, but it's telling the story
Hmm.
of the creation. But now it starts earlier, and it starts from like the fall of Lucifer.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, there's some scriptures that kind of reference it, and it will cite these, or it will actually have these scriptures and kind of, I guess, the transcript of what's happening. That Lucifer in Mormon belief, sought to destroy the agency of man. That's the reason why he gets cast out of heaven. And the means with which he sought to destroy the agency of man was he had a plan. Like Mormons believe that there was what is called a pre-existence, that we did not develop our consciousness here or at birth, but that we developed our consciousness some other place,
Hmm,
and that we came to earth and inhabited in like a corporeal form for the first time. So that's what the earth is about, is like our consciousness is now inhabiting a physical form for the first time.
interesting.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. So Lucifer, though, like back before we had bodies, we had corporeal form, and we're all just talking about like this plan to have us all kind of like keep progressing and evolving along kind of this path. His suggestion is, okay, I'm going to send everybody to Earth in this corporeal form, and I'm going to, force them to not make mistakes and to retain this kind of innocence and purity. Uh,
Huh.
and then the counter plan is that is the Christian part is that Jesus instead is going to sacrifice for everybody's mistakes and impurities, and he's going to repurify us so that way we can keep our agency. We can keep our agency and
Mm,
have the ability to make mistakes and learn from our mistakes, and he's going to pay the cost
interesting.
of the mistakes. Yeah. So those two
Wow,
competing
yeah, okay.
plans, but since
Huh.
like in Mormon theology, the one thing God will never do is take away somebody's agency. So
Yeah,
like agency is so sacrosanct.
yeah,
It's the most
yeah.
I don't
We
know
believe
how to
that
say
too,
it.
free will. Yeah.
Yeah, personal part
Hmm.
about your personhood. It's like the most
Yeah.
kind of central part about somebody's personal dignity, I guess their
Hmm.
humanity or whatever. So Satan gets cast out, right? Because it's like, oh, if you can't be trusted to not kind of interfere with people's agency, then you're a baddie. We can't have you kind of around
Mm,
people. And so
mm.
he's kind of this interesting character for me when I think about this topic of like personal safety, because on the one hand, yeah, we did have to cast him out, or we did think that it was smart. But on the other hand, we allow him to kind of still do it, whatever he does, like the Mormon
Yeah.
belief would be kind of trying to influence people
Hmm.
still currently, but he can't,
Sure. Yeah.
he's not given the power, authority, or position to destroy the agency, but like Lucifer's actually portrayed like in a video that kind of shows this whole kind of process, like the creation, and then he tempts Adam and
Mhm.
Eve, etc. And there's one point where he says he gets kind of really frustrated and maybe kind of feeling especially vulnerable. And in his vulnerability, he doesn't kind of like embrace the vulnerability and be like, yeah, I can't control things, you know,
Mhm.
but I can still be okay with that. He instead
Right.
says he's going to do all XYZ things. He's going to like acquire all this power and authority and all this
Mm.
money and all these
Mhm.
things so that he, and this is the quote, so that none may molest or make afraid. And I always thought this is such
Ah,
like the perfect motivation for him. Like, why did he do all these kind of things? And I think it is that he is trying to protect himself, right? So that none may
yeah.
molest or make afraid. He's trying to get to a
Mhm.
point of a sense of security where, because it
Mhm.
is scary, you know, given that we're in this world where everybody has their own agency. Like I drive on the freeway sometimes and I'm like, this person to the left of me or something could just like veer in my lane and I'm dead.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's just it,
Yeah.
you
I've
know?
thought of
And
that too. Yeah.
yeah, I have no predictability. Like when you really think about it, I have zero predictability. You know, they used to say, oh, there's like razor blades in the Halloween candy. People who don't celebrate Halloween, which is most of the world, this never happens, but I feel like it's always in the news. Like,
Yeah.
who's
The
eating
one
kids or
time
like,
it's
yeah,
in
the
the
candy with
news.
the razor blades or whatever. Like, nobody actually swallowed a razor blade. But,
I
you
think
know,
it's
like,
the idea that like someone could use something to like manipulate and do harm. I think that's why that's so scary and why that gets so much attention. And kids are
well,
seen as like very innocent, even though they're quite selfish creatures. But
yeah, that's true.
that's
But, you
another
know, kind of
episode.
taking that, there's certain risks that we're just kind of blind to. Like people are scared of sharks, but actually the greater threat is air pollution, right? You know, you're much
Mm,
more likely to
sure.
die or be hurt by air pollution than you are by a shark. In fact, we all are being,
Yeah.
you know, hurt
Yeah.
by air pollution. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like certain things are scary to us and other things are not. And I actually sometimes I click into Twitter about the when I see like a hashtag that's like COVID is not over, I click into it and I just kind of like look at the stuff. And some people get really
Mm,
pissed about that. Some people have a lot of emotional attachment to pandemic
mhm.
related topics, let's say. And
Yeah.
the mask people, I get it because yeah, it is an airborne disease and yeah, it has all these kind of negative things. Um, it's tricky because you know on the flip side, I don't know. There's all sorts of airborne diseases. But so they're wearing a mask,
Yeah.
I guess. So they're like the extra protection and stuff. And I think, yeah, sure. But then, you know, the thing that I think is not a precaution we should be taking are this is a total tangent, sorry, are these comfort
Okay.
collars on like when you ride a roller coaster. And now they make kind
Oh.
of the protections like they come against your legs and it's like physically
Oh yeah.
impossible for you to come out of them the way that they're attached to like your shin
Hmm.
and then on your lap
Mm.
too. So your upper leg and your lower leg are both
Wow.
attached. But people get so freaked out by that. They're like, I'm gonna fall out, that they have like these over the shoulder things that do nothing. So they call them comfort
Mm.
collars.
Yeah.
So you don't feel like you're gonna slip out or whatever. But I hate them because they like, you know, they're constricting and they're unnecessary or something. But just everybody
Yeah.
has kind of their own like risk threshold. But the truth is that and this is kind of a scary truth, is that you can't control anything, right?
Yes.
Nothing's can be controlled. The illusion of control is so tempting. Like the
Hmm.
truth is that even if you do all these things, you still can't control. The illusion of control, though, is like so soothing. And I feel badly sometimes. These COVID is not over. People will be like, I let my guard down once. You know, I went to
Uh-huh.
like a outdoor beer garden and I didn't wear my mask the whole time and I got COVID. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, this person feels badly, but why? You know, they
Right.
feel like it's their fault. Is it their fault? You know, you can take all precautions and still not get COVID, and you take none and not, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I
Yeah, I
guess
mean, they're mhm.
to the extent that we kind of sometimes want to like engage in this, I feel like we are kind of being a little bit like the motivation of Lucifer, which is that we are so uncomfortable with uncertainty and we're so uncomfortable with kind of the lack of control and predictability that we are willing to sacrifice things that are really important, like agency or
Mhm.
our own identity, in order to
Mhm.
get the illusion of security, in order to get the illusion of predictability.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, yeah, I was busy soaking in what you were saying. I didn't think of a response,
No worries. You're probably
which
I
is
wondered if you were
good.
wondering though, what does this have to do with my question?
No, it makes sense. It makes sense to me, but if you want to connect it, go for it.
Yeah, I mean that is so these things are true, that to a large extent we don't control things, but it is still true
Right.
that like seatbelts save lives,
Yeah.
so I think that's a difficult thing too, is to kind of be
Hmm.
like, yeah, this because I drink diet soda all the time and people, loved ones, especially my mom is like, no, you're gonna die of cancer.
Oh,
Because of the artificial sweeteners or whatever.
yeah.
And I think, yeah, maybe I will die of cancer, And I actually feel like smokers in a lot of ways, I feel like they are chill people, can sometimes be chill people
Mm.
because they're like, yeah, this might kill me. And I kind of
Yeah,
I
yeah,
admire
that's a good point.
in a way their ability to just be like, yes, this is a possibility. I'm not afraid of acknowledging the possibility.
Mm.
Like what I'm not saying that people should or shouldn't be fearful about the smoking. I guess the thing that I want to like zero in on is people who like would rather have an illusion than to just see the truth. Like it's okay to be afraid of
Yeah,
sharks. The weird thing to me is like being afraid of sharks, like to not even kind of
yeah,
acknowledge, like the possibility of something because you just rather kind of have the illusion of certainty, to kind of just
sure.
ignore certain things at the expense of others.
Yeah. I definitely went through that process of like, like, do I really want to, like, when I was coming out, I was
Mhm.
like, what happens now if I admit this to myself and if I am honest with myself about this? I think for a long time, I refused to see it because I was like, I can't admit that about myself because that means everything's going to change. And I don't
Mm,
like that. Like, even though
yeah.
nothing changed on the surface, it was like how I saw myself
Well,
changed.
change in
Eh,
ways that you can't control or predict, you
Right.
know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I knew that there were people in my life who were very dear to me who wouldn't be okay with this if I told them. And
Yeah.
so, like, it was just like, for a long time, I just was kind of like, well, I mean, let's ignore this and just pretend that it's not a thing because I don't even want to look at that.
Yeah.
And and even being where I am now, like it's like um the cool thing about admitting stuff to yourself is like you can admit it to yourself and then you can choose what happens with it. So like
Yes.
I waited until there was a bet, until I was more comfortable or I was more sure of myself to share it with people with whom I knew it might not be very well received. And like I kind of prepared myself for that. And it was still hurtful and disappointing. But there were also people with whom I thought it wouldn't be well received. And then I shared it and then they were like totally cool.
Mm,
So it really, it just you just never know. Um so it's kind of an interesting thing once you like take that risk and just just to be honest with yourself and to kind of um work through that yourself. And going back to like emotional safety, like when you feel like you've built up uh an emotionally safe relationship where you can tell somebody something about yourself, um sometimes I'll preface with, can I share something personal with you so that the person understands like this is something really personal. So like be gentle here if you don't agree with me.
Yeah.
But and even just like, it kind of makes them, this feels really manipulative now I think about this. It makes them feel kind of special because then they're like, oh, I'm gonna learn something personal. Um,
Mm.
so so that is one way I've found to kind of get around it. And then even just like having the dignity and wherewithal to remove myself from a situation when I realize it isn't going in a positive, safe direction,
Yeah.
to be like, I'm just going to be honest with myself instead of like pretending that everything's fine. I'm going to just remove myself from this situation. And actually, you said something in one of your earlier interviews, can't remember when it was. I don't listen to much of your interviews, but they stick with me. It was something about how like you and your dad got into an argument about something and you were like, okay, like where are my keys? I'm going
Yeah.
to go now. And I think that phrase to myself all the time, like, where are my keys? Like, how am I going to get myself out of this situation? Because I've realized that it's not a good time right now.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
not a
want
good
to,
time.
yeah, I want to preserve my relationship with this person. So instead of letting this thing totally deteriorate, I'm just going to leave right now and we're going to take some time to cool off. And it might be better in the morning. So that was really cool. It was just so interesting to me um to kind of hear about how and even like my other psychopath friends have said this too, like how they like as they develop their sense of self, they kind of realize these boundaries that they have. Because I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, like I kind of before I was talking to real people who were really experiencing this for real, like I kind of saw psychopathy as like this thing where like I am out to win. These are my boundaries. If you cross my boundaries, I'm going to crush you into a million pieces and break the pieces and burn the pieces and destroy you because you're keeping me from what I want. And to me, that said, like, this is my boundary. If you cross it, I will, like, that seemed like an extreme boundary. So it was really interesting to hear, like, to kind of like talk to people and actually learn, like, oh, like, I don't know, like, I'm learning kind of for myself, like, what my boundaries are. Because I kind of thought that they had that figured out already. Because they were so like fixated on what they wanted and they were going to Hulk smash anyone who got in their way of that. So it's just really interesting to me. And I don't know where that comes from, if it's like a boundary thing or if it really is just like a um like I don't know, like I got a puppy recently and she's very brilliant and um she wants what she wants. And like sometimes when I have to tell her no, like she'll do things to try and get what she wants. And it's not like a boundaries thing, it's more of like a battle of wills thing. So I don't know. Yeah, and like yeah, if you have any thoughts about that, I'm really curious about like how those two things differ, like having wanting what you want and like Hulk smashing anyone who comes in the way of that versus having like as you develop sense of self and having boundaries. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. So and remind me, I'm gonna hit this, but this other kind of topic I kind of alluded to, but maybe didn't make clear enough that anyone can connect the dots about. So like there are physical laws that for the most part, okay, quantum physics and stuff, sure, there's weird stuff happening when we get down to it. But like Newtonian physics or whatever, like yeah, as I said before, like seatbelts save lives.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that we can kind of predict in the physical world. Even kind
Mm-hmm.
of with animals. Their
Mm-hmm.
instincts are simple enough, and predictable. And to a certain extent, humans, there's some
Yeah.
predictability. But it's as you say, like if you're going to come out to some friends and family, you cannot predict or control, really, their
Right.
reactions. And that
Yep.
is just kind of a reality. And so I like to think this is why I kind of like the story of Lucifer in this context, because I like to think that it's not just my problem, it's everybody's problem. In fact, it is the
For
root
sure.
problem, yeah, of having a situation where you have all these people with agency, you know, and you can't control them and you shouldn't control them.
Hmm.
Like that's
Yeah.
the one thing you cannot do. And so but I also like the story because, you know, when I was little, I was like, Lucifer didn't seem like that bad of a guy, you know, and I feel like this is actually not an uncommon thing in Mormonism to kind of think, because he is
Mm.
trying to kind of accomplish something for us. I think especially children, I guess.
Right.
I
Like it
don't know
appears
about adults.
good.
Yeah,
It
he's
appears like,
trying.
oh yeah, then we would never do anything bad. It would be great,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you guys you'll be great, you know? Yeah, exactly. So it's a very, like, ends justify the means type
Hmm.
situation where he's choosing outcome over process and saying, you know,
Right.
we can accomplish what everybody wants, without having to risk anything, because
Hmm.
the other option has all sorts of risk. You know, you won't
Yeah.
know how you're gonna act. You won't know,
Right.
you know, whether you'll be able to do what you're going to be asked to do what's required for you to kind of like level up,
Hmm.
you know, you'll have to live with the guilt maybe, or the understanding that you've done bad things. You know, you'll have to
Yeah.
reconcile all these things. You know, it's going to be really complicated, and it's not the box plastic window box, you know, like
Right.
Lucifer was offering. It's instead like a totally unknown thing. And I feel
Hmm.
like that's how kind of psychopaths are, is they tend to want to do this Luciferian approach, kind of for the same reasons. You know, it's who knows what happened to Lucifer to make him kind of so risk averse.
Sure.
You know, to kind of
Huh.
be like, I'd rather, you know, like when given this choice, like the risk disturbed him so much, you know, like the risk of not, or the uncertainty of, you know, like not being able to predict, not being able to control. He was uncomfortable with that situation so much that he was like, no, I will be able to control, you know, and still kind of lies to himself and says, I will be able to control. You know, that's the motivation that we get from him, you know, when he says that I'm going to do all these things, acquire all these things, so I can finally get to the state where I feel comfortable, where I feel like I'm in control enough of everything around me and everyone around me, that I feel like I'm
Mm.
not threatened, that I feel like I'm not vulnerable. And that very much
Hmm.
is, I think, a psychopathic motivation, is that whatever happened to them, or whatever kind of like, you know, however they experience the world, they're so uncomfortable with their vulnerability and the lack of certainty and the lack of control that they have in their lives, that they can't handle it, and they try to do everything that they can, instead of trying to be like, I'm going to do everything I can to feel at peace with the world as it is, you know, with my level of vulnerability, etc. They think, I'm going to change the world so I'm never vulnerable to anyone, to anything, you know, to the extent
Mm.
that I can. That really is the motivation,
Hmm.
of like why they manipulate, of why they control, of why they're so outcome oriented, of why, you know, it seems like it's you kind of suggested like, if you cross this boundary, then you're like dead to me. But the boundary is not like a real boundary. Like, boundary is not just what you say it is. You know, like a
Mm.
boundary is like, my personal boundary is me, you know. It's, I can't make it
Right.
bigger or smaller. It is what it already
Yeah.
is, you know, like that
Yeah.
word is
Yeah.
not kind of capable of being
That makes
expanded.
sense.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like New
Because
Orleans or
oftentimes you don't
whatever.
even know what a boundary, you don't even know that something's a boundary until somebody comes up against it. And then you're like, oh, whoa, whoa, that was a boundary. Huh.
Yeah, like
Interesting.
I can't say it's a boundary that, you know, my boundary is, I don't know, that nobody ever uses a, I don't know, a
That's
colloquialism I
fine.
don't like. You
Yeah.
know? I can't impose like kind of my will on things that aren't me. You know, like what is me is my boundary,
Sure.
you know, and things that aren't me. So like when psychopaths are kind of like, oh, you know, you've dared to molest or make afraid or something, and they go like ape whatever on you.
Uh-huh.
It's like a baby's tantrum. It really is the most childish thing.
Mm.
It's like when you tell a kid, it's like, I just moved into a new neighborhood and it was so funny. I heard like craziest meltdown from one of my neighbors, like one of their
Oh,
toddlers, that like crazy cry where it's like,
yeah.
and it lasts for like 20 minutes because by the time they get to
Yep.
that point, they're just like, I mean, it's like very animalistic in a way. There's
Yeah.
no
Yeah. They just
rationality.
lose it all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but that is kind of what it is with a psychopath. It's like, oh,
Huh.
you have disturbed my illusion of control and predictability, and that
Mm,
hurts me so deeply because I've done
mm,
all of this stuff to try to maintain this illusion that I'm not vulnerable, and now you have made me confront the fact that actually am vulnerable, and now I hate you. I hate you, and I hate what you did
interesting.
to me. Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
Now,
It
that's
makes
how
sense.
psychopaths are,
Yeah.
yeah. But I still think here's the kind of thing, it's like what you said with the keys, like how do given that I am this way, I'm not saying I'm different. I have
Right.
a deep discomfort with vulnerability. I want to be in control. I know I have these natural tendencies to want to kind of solve my problems by orchestrating, like to the nth degree, everything I can manipulate, everything I can predict and control, and kind of like set it up in all these different ways, rather than like confront the realities. We live in this world of uncertainty and a lack of control. Rather than confront those two realities,
Mm,
my temptation is to want to double down on the illusion of control, right?
mhm.
And so, people should be have good boundaries with me, you know, like people should have good boundaries
Yeah.
with whoever, and just kind of know that
Yeah.
that's what people are going to try to do. And I've had to have it with people too. Some of the I would say some of the people that kind of influenced the development of my own personality disorder, like my dad, I
Sure.
have to have really firm boundaries with him because those are even more
Yeah.
triggering to me than just
Oh,
usually
absolutely.
some random
Yeah.
person at the gas station or something.
Yeah.
Like for
Yeah.
that, I have to have like really but it's interesting. I just listened to again, this is like a Christian scripture, like Jesus in the New Testament says that peace I give unto thee, or peace I leave you, or leave you, or
Yeah.
peace I give unto you.
But
Yeah,
not as
not
the
as
world gives peace.
yeah,
Yeah.
give I
I don't
unto
remember the
you.
rest
Yeah,
of it.
let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be
Yeah.
afraid. And it's
I
really
love that
interesting.
one.
Yeah, he's talking about this issue, and I heard on like some Mormon Instagram like story. You probably nobody's going to be able to look it up, but the dude kind of cites it, and he said this Mormon guy who's just like, what do we say, Instagram story takeover. He's just like
Mm.
some guy. If you kind of look him up, maybe you'll be able to see it. Hollis, he said his name was Hollis, I think. And
Okay.
he said, he's come to interpret like in like the things that he's struggled with in his life, like the peace that the world gives you is the illusion of control. And he
Yeah.
says the peace that Jesus is saying like you should be seeking instead is like this peace of knowing that you're going to be okay no matter what.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's been a big thing in my life too, even just like as a person who's blind, like I have people come up to me all the time. And I know I talked about this a little bit last time too, where they'll be like, "Oh wow, you're so amazing. You like cross streets and stuff. Like you could die." And I'm like, "Yes, I could die. Like just like a car could turn and hit me when I'm, quiet car, or like maybe I do make a calculation in error and I cross at a bad time." But it's like, like that piece, um just that my faith brings me is a lot of that, like, well, yes, this could happen, but I need to go live my life. Like I have things to do in my
Yeah.
life, and I don't want I don't want fear to stop me from living my life. And see, I say that, but
Mhm.
then there's all, then it's like drilling down to the root of like, okay, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, am I truly living this way? Like, am I really not afraid to show up um everywhere um as me? And I'm not there yet. It's a process, but I think like, I think that, getting to that point of surrender and like knowing that somebody bigger than you has those things under control, and that they, for me, like that's God, like that he knows what's going on, and he's got my best interest at heart. Like it's kind of like freeing. Like sometimes when I'm praying, if I think about something that's stressful, I can just give it to him and be like, here you go, here's this stressful thing, please help. Like I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know, uh I don't know what the solution is for um for people who don't have that, to lean on, because that would be kind of a chaotic resolution to be like, well, geez, there's no, everything's uncertain, and what can I control? What if I can't control anything? Yeah,
That
oof.
is kind of though the truth. Like you can't even control, like you say you rely on God, but even in
Yeah,
your own belief system, right? God just does what he wants or what he thinks is best for you, not necessarily what you
absolutely.
want or what you're comfortable with,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But
Yeah, definitely.
also
And
the Stoic
it's
philosophers though are big about this, like only control what
yeah,
you can control or only
yeah,
focus on what you can control. And you have to
yeah,
kind of just come to terms with, this life is full of surprises. It really
yeah,
just is. And you can
yeah.
appreciate it, see it and appreciate it for what it is, or you can live in an illusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it really makes a difference, um once you're able to have that realization, um and even just like recognizing the agency of other people, like even for me, like recognizing like, oh, this person might not accept me, but that's okay, like that they can think how they want, like I can't make them accept me. All I can do is just show them who I am, and that's all I can do. Like, it's just like making that choice to do that, um is yeah, it can be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't want to kind of I feel people like listening to this might be like, "Oh, so kind of like you can't control things." But you can't control things is more you don't have total control. Like you
Right.
definitely
Yeah,
do influence things. And there's
absolutely.
certain things like me, I mean, maybe it's possible that I'd be stuck, I don't know, in a bomb shelter or something with my dad, and I couldn't be able to just grab my keys and leave. But the truth is
Right.
that most of the circumstances are most days I can choose to meditate. And I know when I meditate that I have more patience. I have an expanded ability, distance from, the trigger and my
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah.
I know that I feel better, and I feel more at peace. And I know that I feel more like I'm being thoughtful and intentional when I meditate. I know when I love to take baths every other night. I take a bath
Mm,
and I'll be like, "Oh,
nice.
it's bath day."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
cooks my
I
brain and it like just chills everything out. So there's so many things that you can control. I thought of
Yes.
this story earlier, and maybe this is it's kind of a funny story. So one of my friends from church told this story in church about how so I like live kind of close to water, the ocean and beaches and stuff. And she was talking about how she went out with her brother-in-law to like this particular area in La Jolla in San Diego. La Jolla Cove, La Jolla Shores is the area if people want to look it up. And it was like early on a Saturday morning or something. They had these kayaks, and like the water was so flat, and
Mm.
it was so early in the morning. It wasn't crowded at all, and there were a bunch of sea caves in that area, and there are a bunch of sea
Yeah.
lions, yeah, that
Oh,
live in that
cool.
area. Yeah.
I've read
So she,
about doing the
yeah,
sea cave
yeah.
tours on a kayak. It's really neat.
Yeah, so she's talking about how she's, like, going in the kayak into the caves, and she said it was so early that even the little sea lions were, like, asleep up in the
Oh,
cave, and you just, like, see,
wow.
like, a little mom or little babies or something, and so
Cute.
she said that it was so calm that they were making such good progress, and at one point, like one of them, she said to her brother-in-law or something like, "Oh, there's a dolphin behind you." And he's like, "Actually, there's a
Cool.
dolphin behind you." And so they were like in the middle of this pod of dolphins. And she was like,
Wow.
yeah, she was like, it was so magical, it was so great and stuff. And we made such good time that we thought, hey, let's just paddle into the shore. Like the tide's low enough that there are tide pools over here at the shore. So they're pretty far away. If people are familiar at all, it's like they were over at the caves and then they went over to the pier, but they were where their car was closer to the caves. So
Okay.
they went some distance over to the pier. They went ashore, they got off their kayaks, they're looking at the tide pools and having like this great time or whatever. Then they decide to, and at the pier is actually like a pretty good surfing break. So there are waves there,
Mm.
and if you've ever kayaked out in waves, it's different than kayaking out
Hmm.
without waves. You can probably imagine why. If a wave is strong enough to push a surfboard, a wave is
Yeah.
certainly strong enough to push a kayak, right?
Oh, boy.
So she said that she had actually talked to some other like people in the ward, including some young people like 12, 13-year olds about like some advice about the kayaking thing. And, they gave her advice like actually if when you're going through the wave, it's best to like hold on like as far forward on the kayak as you can, that's like more stable than kind of like
Hmm.
holding back where you're sitting, to put more of your weight in the center of the kayak that way and more of your weight kind of over your
Sure.
feet helps. And the key, though, to kayaking out in a wave is to always stay perfectly straightforward. And this is true of surfing too. You should always make sure the surfboard or whatever is always perfectly straightforward because if you like, you can even you can't see what other people can see in the
Oh, I can
video.
picture it though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The aerodynamics of it, or I guess the water dynamics
Okay.
of it. Yeah, the friction or whatever. Like as the wave pushes, if it's just pushing on the very tip of something, that's not a very big surface area to
Hmm.
assert the pressure. But if it's kind of if the kayak's broadside or the surfboard's
Yeah.
broadside in the wave, then that's a huge surface area that now the wave can assert its pressure on. It's like a knife cutting through
Right.
something, right? Yeah,
That
same
makes sense. Yeah.
same physics. So she was saying, she even told her brother-in-law, she's like, you know what? We can just kind of drag our kayaks in the water and just go walk to some place that's not a break. That's not a surf break where the waves are actually big enough to kind of that they're crashing. And he's like, no, 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 we can do it. We can do this.
Mhm.
And so she's like, okay, here we go. So you have to kind of like uh push slash pull your kayak out far enough to in the water so you can sit and then you have to start paddling. You have to paddle really hard, because you have to like make it through all these
Right.
kind of waves that are crashing on you. And she said the key though, since you always want to have as little surface area interacting with the wave as possible
Yep.
is you need to make sure your nose is pointing perfectly forward, always perfectly forward. It can't even be like slightly off. Otherwise, the wave can kind of like grab it basically and then
Mm.
tumble you over and over again. You flip, 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 flip. You
Wow.
go flying, the kayak keeps going all the way to shore, because the kayak will just keep
Right.
riding the wave all the way to shore.
Yep.
So she said she made it out first try, right? And then she turned around and looked
Wow.
and her brother-in-law, no. So she kind of yells at him, like, "Hey, make sure you're perfectly pointed forward." So he tries it again. He flip, 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 flip. He'd get just a little bit
Oh.
off. He'd just get like pointed a little bit in a different direction and the wave would come and
Mm.
then he'd flip all the way back to shore. So she says they keep doing this for a long, long time. Finally, he tries a new direction and I've done kind of something similar, I feel like. So I get him on this, is that he decides to like paddle out on the kayak on his stomach as if it's like a surfboard. So he's paddling,
Okay.
paddling, and he makes it out this way. That way was more successful for him for whatever reason. I think kayaks, they're hard because you paddle on one side and it pushes you the other direction. So
Yep.
it is really hard to stay
Yeah.
perfectly pointed forward. So he
Yeah.
found greater success doing it by just laying on his stomach. And so he got out there. She's like, "Great, you did it." And so she's helping him, she's holding his paddle, he's trying to kind of like readjust himself, in the kayak in
Right.
like, I don't know, 15, 20-foot deep water. So he's sitting normally so he can paddle again. But as they're trying to make this adjustment, they're drifting in closer to the shore. And
Oh
once
no.
again, yeah, they're in the wave breaking. So she sees it in time, and she paddles enough, she is able to get herself again perfectly, straight in the wave.
Huh.
He is not able to get perfectly straight in the wave, and so
Oh.
he goes all the way back to shore. And she says that she ends up paddling back in, and she's like, "Hey, we don't have to do this. We can, we can drag our kayaks to somewhere else to paddle out." It's been hours now. They've been out
Yeah.
on like this very long kayaking trip now. And he's like, no, 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 I can do it. I can do it. And then finally he's able to get out, mostly with the help like of some people who had been watching this probably for like an hour. Decided to like go out and help him. But and she kind
Mm.
of said, and like telling the story, she said, "Isn't life like that? Like sometimes it's like, sea lions and sea caves, and like you're surrounded by
Yeah.
dolphins, and sometimes it's like flip, 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 flip in the water."
Yeah.
But I
Absolutely.
often also liked it. I really like this story because I feel like it's so true. This idea that like even if you're slightly off, you'll have a problem because this has happened to
Mhm.
me too before. Like I won't blame the people that I've been kayaking with, and she didn't blame him either. But it's like
Right.
you tell them over and over again, the
Uh-huh.
very most important thing for you
Yeah.
is to stay perfectly pointed, and it's almost like that I don't know, that they don't believe you or something because
Mm.
she's not stronger than he is. There's
Sure.
nothing, but he's probably thinking it's about strength or whatever. He thinks it's about
Yeah.
something that it's not about, and she's
Mm.
kind of living
Mhm.
proof in that moment that it's about the things she said, but it's
Yeah.
almost like
Yeah.
everybody has to learn the hard way. But I often think in life when I'm having a hard time, when I feel like I'm tumbling in the wave, sometimes I think, hey, I need to make a big change. I need a big adjustment. We
Mhm.
need to be doing this like way differently. And often it's actually just like I'm slightly off. That's the reason why,
Yeah.
I had this kind of experience recently, actually with surfing. My sister had taken surfing lessons. She had done some traveling and she had taken surfing lessons with her kids. So she was talking about it with me and the experience and some of the techniques she had learned. And I have actually been surfing since I was a child, but I've never been good. I'm like kind of a beginner and not, like you probably wouldn't even call me intermediate looking at me. I can get on basically any wave. Like it's very easy for me to catch waves. It's easy for me to stand up on waves. It's easy for me to ride waves, but there's a little bit of a finesse or something that seems to be
Mm.
kind of missing from it. Uh, so I thought, okay, this year I'm going to like when I have the opportunity to surf, I'm really going to work on the technique. I'm not going to kind of like default back to some of my bad habits. And
Sure.
I'll tell you some of these bad habits. Do you have time?
Yeah.
Okay. So some of these bad habits were that I'd be like holding on to the rail when I pushed up. And I learned from like Instagram and
Mm.
from my sister that actually you need to put your hands in like right underneath your kind of chest. And one of the reasons why
Ah.
is yeah, you're pushing yourself up so kind of hard and fast. So your legs can kind of come up and underneath you.
Yeah.
Right? And if your arms are
Yeah.
even like the rail is like it's too wide, you're losing
Yeah. Yeah.
out on
Yeah.
maybe like an inch of clearance, and that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough that your legs can't actually get up. And it was so
Mm.
bad that my legs would like hit the board as they were kind of coming up, and I was getting like
Mhm.
kind of scratches and bruises on the top of
Sure.
my knees because they'd hit the
Ooh.
board so hard because there wasn't enough clearance, and my
Yeah.
flexibility is probably bad. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna hold the rails anymore, and I'm gonna do this. And she's like, also put your back foot forward first. Like just think. So for me, I'm regular footed. So for me, I'd put my right foot forward up first and then quickly put my left. But to think about it as like kind of this quick right left, back forward, back
Uh-huh.
foot first, forward first. So I did this over and over again, and I was getting smashed by these waves because I
Oh.
was doing it differently than I had done it
Yeah.
since I was a child. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
decades. So I'm just
Right.
getting hammered, and, but I had, like, such, like, this peace in doing it. I
Mm.
was like, "I am finally fixing this. I am finally on
Yeah.
a path that's not just this dead end path of just like always being a beginner. Like I can feel
Yeah.
myself, like some of my bad habits, some of the things that have kind of been holding me back just kind of fall away, and just little adjustments.
Mm.
I still had the same swimming strength, arm strength, to catch the waves. I still had the same knowledge of the waves. I still had the same everything, everything, everything. I just moved my hands and had like a slightly
Mhm.
different foot thing. And it like made all the difference.
Mm.
I'm still not, I probably need at least like, I don't know, 50 more waves or something to get to
Mm.
intermediate, to where I feel like, okay, that's now my new habit or something. But I
Yeah.
had,
Yeah.
instead of like years of kind of thinking I'm just not good at surfing, I suddenly had a hope and I thought, I
Mm.
could be good at surfing. I was just doing it slightly wrong. I was just doing it slightly wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I often think about when we talk about things like really tricky things, like the things that we've been
Mm.
talking about today is, it is a very uh precision based thing, in every
Mhm.
moment we're constantly having to balance our need for safety versus our need to acknowledge our inherent vulnerability. That is not something where
Yeah.
you can just be like, hey, no, you just need to constantly be vulnerable, because that's not true.
Right.
Like, you
Absolutely.
vulnerable to abuse, no. Vulnerable
No.
to mistreatment, no. Just because
Mhm.
you can't control people doesn't mean that you have to subject yourself to them constantly.
E-
That's not what should be happening. But
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it's not the opposite either, where you're
Right.
so opposed to ever being exposed to anything that's kind of not your choice or preference, that you're just so rigid about it. You just like fight it, and
Mhm.
then you end up kind of you end up influencing or hurting somebody's agency, because you're like, I'm so opposed to ever being affected by anyone's choices that I'm going to not allow you to make that choice, basically,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. 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 Uh, yeah. It's really interesting kind of, living in that middle space and like
Yeah.
finding, like learning the discernment of like when do I be vulnerable, and then when do I uh assert my, you know, like when do I assert myself, and when do I kind of just like go with what people want, or because like sometimes it's like if there wasn't a benefit to people pleasing, no one would do it. So there's times
Mhm.
where it's like good to, like if you're part of a team and people are saying like, oh yeah, we all need to move toward this objective, then yeah, it's important to make sure that you're kind of, if that objective is something you want to do, it's important to kind of go along with what the group thinks too.
Yeah.
um yeah. I'm trying to think if I had any other thoughts, um because I thought I did, but
I know I
that
talked
sounds
for a long
really,
time,
really
and we've been
silly.
talking
No,
for
it's
a long
okay.
time.
Yes, yes, we have. Um, yeah, it's funny because last time we talked, it was like, it felt really profound to me. And so, like, this time has been really, really good, but I haven't had any like profound, like, light bulb moments. So I'm kind of like, like, like,
Mm.
is this, like, but this is probably what someone else needs to hear, like, it needs to not be all about me and my light bulb moments. Um,
Mm. I like this honesty. I didn't get anything
yeah.
out of this. No.
No, I did. I did. I absolutely did. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and I love like just like talking with someone else who is also thinking about these types of things. Because
Yeah.
again, like I said, I mean the world is full of people who are chicken people, and they just don't think about this stuff, and they're just like, I don't want to put any effort into that. Why would we even
Yeah.
talk about that? Let's talk about the weather. That's a safe topic. And I love it when I can have a conversation and I'm like, we haven't mentioned the weather at all. This is great. Like, this means we're like having an authentic conversation and sharing about our lives and about ourselves. And we don't have to fall back on the weather as a topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing too, is you mentioned like when, like when and this is, I think, something that came up on the Discord, like when you're having a going through unusual or unique circumstances, like to slow down and kind of like pay attention to what's going on around you. Like I've found that to be true too, you know, when I'm going through a time. And like right now, you know, it's like I found that um, the things that I read or the things that I hear or the things that other people tell me or the things that occur to me in my head or even the things that happen to me are like trying to send me messages about like what the next thing is or like even just like what to do. And so like I think if, you know, the more that I stopped living in the box of like, oh, this is what I should be doing, the more open I was to like hearing those things and being like, okay, like this is probably going to be a roundabout way of going about this, but I think eventually I'll end up in the end like where I'd like to be. And I mean, I know our story isn't ended until it's over, but like it's kind of interesting to think about life and stories until like, you know, like reflecting on parts of our lives and being like, okay, like, and this might, you know, because I do have a, I think I do have a narrative in my head of how my life is going, and I don't know. I know that you and other people who experience psychopathy say that that is a tough thing because like there's just not always a narrative there. Things don't always seem connected.
Mm.
But like for me, like trying my best to see things as connected or like to see and reflect on how certain things and certain people have influenced other things in my life has kind of helped me like get through those tougher times and like kind of try and observe and figure out from there like okay, like maybe I don't need to figure out my overarching purpose today, or maybe I just need to figure out one little piece of it today, and that's okay. You know, just to like let go and kind of be open to that, whatever's going on around me. Mm.
I
Big
like that. You,
thoughts.
yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned at the beginning that when you daydream and you said that you enjoy the daydreaming the most, you
Yeah.
about your book that
Yeah.
you yeah, kind of like to think about whatever things, these fun ideas, what if this happened, what if that happened? And some of the criticisms that you get or some of the kind of comments you get is like, okay, but how does this like fit into this like through line of
Yeah.
of a single kind
Yeah.
of like arc? And you said, well, life isn't that way, but you have that tendency too, I guess, in your own life to want to fit it in to an arc.
Yes. It's all, you know, and it's fascinating because like um I see these contradictions in myself. And, you know, in your book, you mentioned people with psychopathy are very contradictory in the sense that they just don't have a sense of self. So they kind of, there's nothing to like hold them to that straight linear line of things. Because like, you know, like you mentioned today about how people with psychopathy are, they're trying to control and trying to have security and stuff. But then they like go like and do like extreme crazy sports and like things that like you know go hang out, like drive fast cars and like do things that are very you know that it could be more risky.
Mm,
So it's just so fascinating to me to like kind of walk in that area of like okay, yes, like you know, are our lives really that much of a narrative? And then at the same time, like, okay, but how are things connected? Like, because I think it's kind of like a both and. Like, there are a lot of days where it's just like, this day happened and I did stuff. But then, like, there's also days where it's like, this important thing happened and it's connected to other things. So I don't know. I mean, I mean, I don't know. It's something I think about a lot. Like, um, because I do believe that our actions here on earth impact, you know, like I believe in heaven and stuff, and that like
mhm.
our actions here on earth impact where we end up. But at the same time, it's like, but there are just a lot of days where we're just like here.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know. It's just, it's so interesting having that like in between space and like thinking about like what has stood out and like what does seem connected, but then also just like what times did I just like eat a chocolate bar and enjoy a chocolate bar because it was a chocolate bar and it was enjoyable? I don't know. It's Yeah, like we live in a really interesting world. But
Yeah.
I just had an insight.
Oh,
Maybe,
okay, good. You
maybe,
did
maybe
finally.
my
Wow.
book, maybe my book isn't a novel. Maybe I should write short stories because I love short stories. I don't know. Like I'm gonna explore that more. Um, uh, because I actually read a really cool book of short stories, and they all kind of featured or were centered around this one character, and she
Oh,
was the main thread that brought them all together. It's called Olive Kittredge, if you want to look it up.
yeah.
It's a really cool book, and she's written other pieces, and she's like famous for this like universe. I don't even know. I'd have to look and see if she has any novels about about these characters, but she just like loves these characters, and she just puts them in all these types of situations, and
Do
it's
they
like
have any connection? Like, is it like there's a chronology, or is it almost like
no,
parallel
it's like
universes?
it's like you little universes. It's like, oh, like here's a perspective. So this main character, Olive Kittredge, is a math teacher. And so there's a story about one of her students. And then there's like a story about like she and her husband when they were like younger. And then the next thing you know, there's a story about them after her husband has died. And like it's just like so interesting. And I'd have to see if she has any interviews out about like how she structured this. But um but I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what I do because I have tons of like I already have written like tons of stories about and of course there's like the main body of work that I did that could be broken up into shorter pieces. And then there's like pieces of like perspective of like my psychopathic character's sister. There's like a couple stories from her perspective, and then there's uh a psychopathic lawyer, sorry,
No
that
problem.
that I wrote about, um and have a couple of stories from her perspective. And like I don't know, like maybe I need to, maybe I just right now anyway, maybe I just take the pressure off of a novel. Like maybe it's just a short story collection, and I don't know what the well, see, then my brain automatically goes to like, could that be published? Like, yes, obviously, people publish short story collections all the time, and I could always self-publish. So, like, it's just, like maybe uh, maybe that's my light bulb moment. I really don't know, but I'm gonna go with it
I had a similar
right now.
experience with moving. I was like so fixated on kind of like this idea of like this particular life trajectory or something. And, like my living situation was like outrageously good or whatever. But also there were
Mm-hmm.
other things that kind of were like stagnant about it,
Yeah.
and I wondered, am I being kind of like overly rigid about this? That was my first
Mm.
realization that maybe I was blind to certain things because I have always
Mm.
noticed that the more rigid I am about thinking something, like the more I kind of want to jump to that box with the little like
Yeah.
clear plastic and see the end, see
Yeah.
what's going to happen, the more I tend to
Yeah.
kind of be tunnel vision about
Yep.
like the way that I'm looking at things and not like seeing other effects or other opportunities that come along. One of
Mm.
the like really good illustrations of this, I'm so glad I had this experience, is like when I got like that first professional musical gig. I think it was like now
Yeah.
it's been like a year ago or something. And it was just so
Exciting.
out of the blue. It was like out of nowhere. And I
Yeah.
thought, this was nowhere in my not in my front view, not in my rear view, not in my like,
Mm.
just, like, nowhere on my radar at all, and to just kind of
Yeah.
remember that there's so much that I would love to experience that I haven't
Oh,
even, like, it's so off my radar that I don't even wish or hope or, like, secretly wanna force it to
yeah.
happen or whatever, and if
Yeah.
I just kind of, like, focus more of my attention on, like, being less rigid and, like, allowing myself to become more aware of these opportunities and to become kind of, like, let myself naturally go to where I am interested and engaged,
Mm.
then the more things just kind of seem to naturally unfold in a way that's really satisfying to me.
Yeah. That's really uh that's really, really cool. Thank you for
So
sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then my intuition's telling me to like mention this again. Maybe you've already
Sure.
heard the story and then I can just reference it. Do you remember the story about my niece in the kiddie pool, the sand?
I
Did
think so.
you yeah, I'll tell it to you really quickly.
Okay.
So my family camps at the beach for a week, my mom's extended family, and this was like now a year or two ago or something. So my niece, who's the youngest of all my nieflings, she must have been like 2 or 3 at the time, and they had all dug, like all of my cousins' kids too. They had dug this huge hole in the sand, and they were trying to fill it with
Mm.
water. So there's like 20 or 30 of these like blonde redheaded Mormon babies like
Oh.
filling this like sand pit with water. I'm like totally the like black sheep, in appearance and whatever else. So they're filling up this pit with water, and like most people who have ever like dug a sand pit understand like water drains very quickly in sand
Yes.
on the beach or whatever. So they're constantly having to do this. And my niece was part of it, but she's so small, like she didn't have buckets. Only the big kids had buckets. So she just had like this like
Mm.
tiny little cup that I don't think it was even meant. I'm not even sure what this cup is meant for, like making little towers on sand castles or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's like half the size of a Coke can or something. So she's going
Mhm.
back and forth between the kiddie pool and doing the sand. And after 20 minutes, they move on to something else. Now they're all like throwing rocks or something. And she keeps doing it though, and she keeps doing it for like an hour
Mm.
after everybody left in like almost this weird zombie like trance. And I just watched her do it, and I was like, "This is crazy how much she keeps doing this." Like, there's no way that these little cups full of water are making any
Yeah,
difference to the level of the sand pit water. And I also thought that it's like draining faster than she could possibly be going
sure.
back and forth. So I had like this kind of thought where I almost like pitied her and thought, she's making no difference to this sand
Mm.
pit pool. And I had like it kept with me like this thought for some reason. And I had kind of an epiphany later, like, she was doing exactly what she wanted to do in that moment. Like, why was I so
Mm.
fixated on whether what she was
The
doing made a
result.
difference? Yeah. In the sandpit pool,
Yeah.
like what difference was it making to her? What difference did it make to like her enjoyment of life, her experience of life, her, the development of her character, like
Yeah.
the overall, like everything you would want for her, like as an aunt,
Hmm.
everything that I would want her to
Yeah.
experience in life, she was experiencing in that moment, but I was being kind of the one who was bum. So sometimes I think about that with my own self, and I think, am I bum to my own self about stuff? Like, can I just enjoy the chocolate bar, for instance? Isn't that what
Hmm.
my aunt would want me to experience? Like what,
Mm.
like anyone who would want goodness for me, they would want me to have these experiences, and why do I feel so weird about them?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's like I think part of it is, I mean, we just live in a culture that's so productivity oriented, and like, and I'm hoping that our friends who aren't in the US may not have some of these hangups, but like we just live in a culture where your worth is like what you do and what your output is, and we're all told this like from a young age, like, oh, you got good grades, that means you're good.
But it's
Like,
just
no,
chicken
like you're,
people. It's chicken fears, it's
yeah,
chicken thoughts, it's
exactly.
boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're good because you exist. Like you're
Or your
here.
book
And
got
that's good.
published. Who cares? It could be one of these things that gets like discovered in 50 years. You know what song I keep thinking of? Do you know the song, Make Your Own Kind of Music?
Mm, yes.
Your own special song. Yeah, I'm like, the people who own the copyright rights to this, because it's in every movie trailer, it's like in every kind of commercial. Like, it has had such a resurgence, like such an odd resurgence. I bet that song has
Mm.
earned more in the year 2023 than any other year of its existence because of all these uses that it keeps getting licensed for. And I'm like, the person who wrote that song is probably dead or whatever. He
Yeah.
doesn't realize it's in every meme video. It's in every like such a
Yeah, it
prolific
might.
song suddenly out of the blue. And like, who could have predicted it? Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you never know. Like someday people might be like, wow, this is like the one piece of literature where the psychopath isn't a serial killer. Let's
Yeah.
promote it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who
And as long
knows?
as you like it, yeah, as long as you think that
Yeah.
it speaks truth to your soul, then somebody else is gonna recognize it too, even if it's gonna take a while. I mean,
Yeah.
when my book came out, like, people were like, you know, like, "I Psychopaths are bum bum, this is an example of it." And
Mm,
it's just changed. It's changed.
hmm,
Things change.
cool. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like maybe it's just not time yet. Maybe the time hasn't come yet. I think like there's this pressure to be and do and achieve and be like, I'm this age, so I should have achieved this much. Like we should be, blah blah. But it's like, no, like I think like it's great because, those things can motivate us to like, move forward and keep changing and growing and stuff. But also like it just might not be time yet. Like I think about, all who I was when I started this journey of my story and like thinking about my characters and stuff. And I my psychopathic character existed, but I didn't know that even that she was a sociopath until like last summer. And so, and I wasn't ready for that. So maybe like, for people like who might be kind of feeling like, well, gee, I wish I was like farther along, or I wish I could figure this out, or I wish I could just like make this happen. Like it's about, being at peace with like where you're at in life and like recognizing that like, okay, you might not be where you want to end up yet, but like that's okay because you are where you are and you're here, like you exist, like you can't get somewhere by being nowhere and
Yeah.
not existing. So that's yeah. That's big another insight, I guess.
You know, and getting kind of back to like the stoic thing and kind of what
Yeah.
we said about Lucifer, like we can't ever control other people's reactions. The only thing we can control is ourselves, but we can invest in
Yes.
ourselves, you know, like we know we'll
Yeah,
always have
definitely.
ourselves. That's the one thing
Hmm.
that we know. So like whatever is best for ourselves, you know, like seems like the a great place to put our time, our energy, our
Yeah.
efforts instead of
Yeah.
worrying about others.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hmm. Well, thank you. This has been a lovely conversation,
Okay, good. I'm
as
glad
always.
we
Yeah. Yeah.
glad we got
Yeah.
the chance to chat. And
Me too.
yeah, thanks for pitching the idea. You know, I've kind of been thinking about this like Luciferian thing, especially since they changed it, right? As I mentioned before, they changed it
Hmm.
in the temple. I've been telling all my friends and family, hey, I actually like the way I think the reason why they changed it, I should probably highlight this. Now they say something that's kind of like more kind of generic, you know, and I think it's probably controversy or kind of just the way that the word molest
Mm.
has changed. You know,
Oh, I
molest, I
got
think,
you. Yeah.
yeah, because I think it's
A
like
lot of people
molestar.
think of it as a sexual. Yes, to bother. That's in
Yeah,
Spanish. It just means
exactly.
to bother. That's all it
Yes,
means.
that yeah, in Spanish.
Yeah.
So that was more kind of the meaning, and now molest
Right.
has a very
Yeah.
specific kind of sexual abuse
Yeah.
meaning, I think. So I
Hmm.
think that's why they
Hmm.
kind of changed it, but they changed it almost too much in this generic way where I feel like they lost the motivation. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad,
Well,
and I've had all these thoughts over the summer, you know, like about the
yeah.
surfing and stuff. So I thought this
Mhm.
would be kind of a good way to, you know, kind of tie things in and like you know, after I'm always so busy in the summer, but hopefully, you know,
Yeah.
hopefully we can kick off a few more Zooms now, get those going again now that the summer is kind of
Yeah.
wrapping up.
Yeah. Sounds great. Well, and now I know what to do if I'm ever like in a kayak where there's a bunch of waves.
Oh my
You
gosh,
never know.
right? It's
You never know what
I
what you might
Back
need.
then though, I love that story because I think people come away and they're kind of like, I'm lost. And I think if you can just
Mm,
kind of ask your intuition, is there like a little thing, like just a little
yeah.
change? And if it's just little changes day by day, there actually is this
Yes.
Mormon concept, I think probably Christian too, line upon line, precept upon precept, like, and this is true in music too, or any skill that we're learning, is that if I get like just slightly better about going from third position to fourth position. You know, if I
Hmm.
just make these slight changes, then they all just build, 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 build until you know you can tell later that you've made some progress. I know that that can be
Yeah.
frustrating, and it can be really frustrating, especially when you're getting like smacked by the waves or whatever. But just this idea, like, don't give up and think, hey, I tried, because actually that guy who kept getting smacked by the waves tried too. But there is a way. You just have to kind of like hit it perfectly. And in music, I'm kind of used to this precision, because if you play slightly out of tune,
Mm-hmm.
that's worse than not playing at all. It's better that you don't
Yep.
play at all. But a lot of people don't get that in their life. They think, "Hey, if I came close and it still didn't work, then it's nothing." It's like, no, so there's certain things in life that, like,
Mm-hmm.
you really have to get, keep trying to get even more and more precise with something. Like, try, get rid of some of these like little things, little tendencies, and then it will feel like finally, like it's resonating, like the light bulb has flipped on, like
Yeah.
it finally it's working, like it feels like that. So that's really hard, because a lot of people, I think, give up before that happens. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like one of the saddest things I know, saddest
Mm.
stories I know in life.
Yeah. Agree.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think too, just one last really quick thought.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
like, the things that we do could end up preparing us for the next thing. So like
Yes.
maybe, a precision in one area brings on a whole different like idea, and then you can like go and do that next idea, but you wouldn't have had that idea if you hadn't worked on the precision in the first area.
Yeah.
So, and just my thought. Okay, that's all.
Totally agree. All right. Talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Emmy.
Laters.